Side Part. It's like a book club with your best friend, but make it a podcast. Welcome back, crawlers. Another episode of Side Part. I'm Nikki, your bookish bestie, and today we are going to begin our crawl through book number 6 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, The Eye of the Bedlam Bride by Matt Dinniman. I'm switching things up a little bit for this book. I am not going to be deciding what chapters I'm reading ahead of time. I'm not going to decide how many episodes I need to cover this book, but rather I'm just going to enjoy it, and I'm going to stop when I feel like it's an organic place to do so. I do think that each episode will cover maybe around 20-ish% of the book, but you know what? That can change week to week depending on how much content there is in a certain amount of chapters. Some episodes might cover more chapters, some might cover less. Honestly, I have no idea what we have in store with this book. I'm hoping it's going to be a bit lighter, but you know what? One thing I've learned is you can never quite prepare yourself for what a Dungeon Crawler Carl book will have in store. And if you want to watch any of my other Dungeon Crawler Carl videos, I've already covered books 1 through 5. I will link them down in the description below. But remember, you are reading along with me. I have not read ahead in this series, so all of my thoughts, theories, reactions are just based on books 1 through 5 and the first 13 chapters of book number 6. Which also means there will be spoilers for the entire series up to that 13th chapter of book 6. Also, friendly reminder, these are very adult books with some very adult scenes. If at any point I feel like there might be certain content that's not really appropriate for little ears, I will give you a heads up ahead of time. But please, please be mindful of your audience at home. As promised, we're going to begin this episode by revisiting all of your comments from the previous week's episode. So the final episode for book 5. You all had such insightful things to share. And truthfully, I think my favorite part about doing these episodes is actually reading the comments. I mean, I love when you all correct me or kind of tell me things you want me to chat about a little bit more or ask for my opinion, or honestly, it could be anything. And I love engaging with you all. And so please continue to do so because it truly is the highlight of my week. I look forward to Tuesdays because I get to chat with all of you. I will say, I don't know what to call this segment. So if you have any like fun, clever names as to what we should name the segment where I review comments from the previous week, please drop it down in the comments below because I would love to have a better name than just time to review your comments from the previous week. So please, I'm going to task you all with that. So hopefully somebody shows up so we have a better name next week. The first comment I wanted to highlight actually was in reference to something I said in last week's episode. So I said, I just don't feel like Carl could truly be this lucky all of the time. And according to Odette, this commenter said, everything is a stat, including wisdom and possibly luck. So Carl's class was compensated anarchist. But then when he was able to pick his subclass, so to specialize it a little bit more, he changed it to agent provocateur on this floor. So according to the wiki, an agent provocateur is someone who A, commits illegal acts. I mean, in my opinion, this entire dungeon feels illegal, but anyway. And B, takes action to convince others to commit illegal acts. And or C, falsely implicates someone else for an illegal act with the intention of ruining the person's reputation and or instigating legal action against that person. So agent provocateurs typically also target groups. That last part is the most telling. During the Butcher's Masquerade, Carl was acting within his class since he took actions to convince others to commit illegal acts in the assault of the Sugar Cube, which was the Elven Castle. And in that final moment, when he told everyone that if they had to lose big, he was targeting a group. I think that because of that, his luck stat was increased or possibly shared with everyone involved. And truthfully, I don't know if I had even begun to think about the possibilities or implications of there being stats like outside of their visible stat sheet. And I do know that like, obviously when Donut had like her bard class, like the more she practiced, the more her character would kind of grow in their ability. I don't know why I didn't apply that also to Carl's subclass. And being an agent provocateur, like the more he practices what that class entails, does it award him hidden benefits that we're not quite aware of? Like, yes, the AI 100% shows deference to him and favoritism time and time again. But does it go beyond just, I don't know, like the AI being obsessed with his feet? Is there something more to that? Like, does the AI kind of keep like keep tabs on different stats that we don't get privy to? Because We know like wisdom is possibly a stat that like, I think the commenter mentioned that. Oh, so yes, the commenter said, according to Odette, everything is a stat, including wisdom and possibly luck. So why not have luck be part of that, right? Why not their ability to competently perform in their subclass lead to increase luck in the dungeon? And it kind of opens up a whole can of worms though, because I always thought the AI was just showing him preference because, like, low key, he kind of just thought he was like hot or he liked his feet, like one of the two. But kind of knowing that, like, their ability to navigate their class and their subclass and to act within that, affording them more luck or favor within the dungeon, I think that's actually really cool. And it would actually make sense. Like AIs don't like necessarily, or at least I don't think they do, have like this organic emotion. Like it needs to stem from a place. So it would only make sense that there's like this like hidden stat sheet that the AI kind of keeps track of. And that's how it grants its favoritism. Also, I think the AI is kind of turning into this like, I mean, sentient being in its own way. I don't know. This is confusing, but this was something that really caused me to go down a rabbit hole and think about the possible implications of what this meant. The second and very important comment that I read, so I should back up a little bit. In last week's episode, I kind of went on, I don't want to say a tangent, but I guess so, of like how sad it is to read these cookbook entries and then to read like shortly thereafter that this was the crawler's last entry. This cookbook author, you know, assuming that they died. And this person commented, and they're so right, that last entry doesn't mean they're actually dead. And yeah, see, this is what I love. This is why I love reviewing your comments, because like, yes, you're right. And we've obviously already met Porthos, or we've seen him in the epilogue. I can't remember. I think it was book 3 or 4. But then we also meet Rosetta in this book, who is also a cookbook author. Let us not forget, too, though, the last entry usually implies like they either died or they possibly took a deal that wasn't quite favorable to them. Because we know Porthos had a ton of years of servitude within the dungeon before he was even able to start his journey to seeking revenge. And I don't know Rosetta's story. I don't know if we really fully know Porthos's either. But I guess what I'm trying to say in a very long-winded way is just thank you. Thank you for correcting that, because I think it's a really important piece and one that actually is very applicable to this story in particular. And it's something important that we need to remember moving forward. The next comment that I wanted to highlight actually was something that I kind of feel bad I didn't cover in the last episode. At the end of the Butcher's Masquerade, there was just so much going on. I mean, it was chaos. And I feel like I was trying to touch on everything at least once, but truthfully, my goodness, I didn't even know where to start and stop. And unfortunately, some things got left out. But this person commented on something that I actually think was quite profound and I feel like does deserve a greater highlight. So let's dive into the comment. The commenter said, "One part, I'm not sure if you felt the same way, but All Eyes on Me broke me emotionally. I'm also reading physical, and behind the paper cover on each hardcover book is a little fun secret message embossed in, and this one's message is All Eyes on Me. I really thought it would be some cool Carl moment. Honestly, I probably would have thought the same. But the fact that it was instead about Donut's song that Bee used to sing to her made me feel so much sadness and love for Donut. She's still mourning and dealing with the loss of her connection with Bee, and I feel like the lyrics really convey their relationship from a kind of selfish human's perspective. Like I can just imagine Bee holding and dancing with Donut, singing this song about how loved she is and how much of a princess she is, while also being a bit selfish and feeling conflicted or bad about it. I totally bawled imagining Donut singing this song and the emotion she probably felt." I mean, you encapsulated like literally every emotion that was rolling through me in those moments. And I feel like, my goodness, I feel like a couple things have happened with Donut that I don't know if I've touched on. I mean, I've talked about Donut's maturity, but I think her awareness, and the emotional depth that she has increased so much in the last 5 books, especially. Like, yes, she is still a cat, but even though she's not a human, I feel like she's really developed like this like sense of humanity. And the song was like almost supposed to like serve as a lullaby. But it was more like this weird, like melancholic, drunken rambling that B used to do. Whereas really, oh my gosh, I feel like B is someone that I really misunderstood, I think. I mean, she was positioned as like just kind of like the girlfriend that cheated on Carl, and she's kind of just like the worst. And sure, I just don't know. I think her character, like all these characters, are a bit more nuanced than that. And I think it would be a little bit reductionist to just simplify to that. I think B is someone who, this is me just kind of rolling with the little nuggets of information we've gotten about B thus far. But if I was going to analyze her, I would say she's a person that consistently runs away from conflict, doesn't know how to effectively communicate, and pairing that with Carl, who is honestly just chronically fine. I can only imagine what that pair was like. But I do think B is someone who feels the pressure and runs from it. And I think if she could do it all over again, I don't know if she would. I don't know if like we've seen this lullaby. I'm not sure if she would put Donut in all of these pageants and feel the pressure of like the fame and success. And I just feel like B has a strong penchant for sabotaging good things. And I mean, she quite frankly abandoned Donut and Carl, but mostly Donut. And just like the pain and the hurt that Donut is able to feel is profound, but her ability to compartmentalize and move forward with dignity is also profound at the same time. So while I didn't actually cover the scene in my coverage at the end of book 5, I just feel like I want this scene to exist within my podcast at some point, because I do believe it gave us some really great insight into like Donut, but more importantly, B's character. And it was so heartbreaking, and it deserved to be unpacked a little bit. I have to admit, I had a hard time picking what comments to feature this week, and so I included one more. I only said I was going to do 2 to 3, but truthfully, this next comment bleeds perfectly into the beginning of book 6, so you know what? What's one more added into the episode? But this commenter said, I feel like you touched on all the main parts in this episode. The only point I feel like you missed was that Carl and Donut got approval to have their own spot in Faction Wars. From what they learned, most crawlers only try to survive the battle in Faction Wars, and now they are going to be leading their own team. So what I will say is I think I mentioned it, but I don't know if I leaned in as hard as I should have about Faction Wars. And it is an important piece, one that we get some information about in Donut's newsletter in the beginning of this book. So before I actually dive into the contents of the newsletter, I think the newsletter, other than just giving us a ton of information and being a really creative way to wrap up the previous book without just like saying outright it was a recap, I think the newsletter shows us like just how adept Donut is at navigating this role as like a fan club leader, but using her position as a position of power. It was something that I was hoping for, truthfully, in the last book. I was hoping she was going to really come into her own and use this reach that she had to do something more impactful and powerful. And she has. And she's also keeping her fan club members very, very much informed through a newsletter. Rather than just like listing out all the things we know about Faction Wars, I'm just going to read the little blurb that she included about Faction Wars directly from the newsletter. So she said, you guys really pulled through. We used the funds from the fan club, and oh my God, we did it. We bought a spot in the Faction Wars. Thanks to Carl and Sledgy, we got all of Signet's former tattoos and helpers, Kiwi and Tina, and all of the changelings into the elf castle. And we teleported the whole castle to the 9th floor, meaning we have an official army, Ferdinand too. Though we don't know if he's going to help us when we get there. Carl and I are now 9th floor warlords. Isn't that great? There's not much we can do about that on this new 8th floor, but because we're warlords, we can vote for stuff that happened in Faction Wars. Carl is trying to make it so we can all really kill each other. Nobody thinks that's going to happen. We'll see. Carl is good at making the impossible things possible. We also learned a few additional tidbits about the Faction Wars, just like organically, either from Zev or from Koisar, like in this set of chapters specifically. So one, we know the lemmings are actually squatting in the elf castle because unfortunately, and we kind of knew this, I can't remember if it was Mordecai or Koisar, but when you use the Zazura spell, Usually it places you in a lower level in a very inconvenient spot. And of course, the elf castle did not land in their area for faction wars. So the lemmings are actually squatting right now in the elf castle. But we do know that the changelings are working hard at constructing a stronghold for Carl. So that was kind of that was good to hear. And I am looking forward to meeting back up with Juice Fox, actually. And we know that Tina is still an Allosaurus, and she is wreaking absolute havoc. And Kiwi is still a bear, but also pregnant, which we will talk about later. And we know all the tattoo, like, memory golems are still kind of hanging around, and they all made it to Carl's area for faction wars. We also learn, oh my gosh, in the prologue with Mordecai and Odette, a normal amount of crawlers to survive the faction wars is around 200. We know that they chronically just try to avoid it, just try to survive it to make it down to the next level. So Carl is putting himself in the fray. I mean, I'm concerned about this, but I just don't think that Borant would ever put the other members of faction wars at risk. Because we saw, like, on the hunting grounds with the hunters, that most of the hunters that were there to gather supplies were viewed pretty much they're just viewed as being dispensable. And I just don't think that's the case for the people actually competing in the faction wars. And I just don't see that happening. But you know what? Like Donut said, Carl is good at making the impossible things possible. But we should also probably talk about the prologue too, because that was heavy. Like I've said this before, but I always felt like Odette just truly cares about Odette and is very self-serving. But I can't help to think that we got a few missing pieces, but we didn't get the full picture with this prologue. It was just like this snapshot. But I perhaps I misread this. And as always, please correct me down in the comments if I'm not reading this correctly. But I feel like she convinced Chaco to kill Uzi, Mordecai's brother, mainly because she, at all costs, she just wanted Mordecai alive. I mean, I think in the prologue, she mentioned that she was going to make it through no matter what. Like, they've performed enough. Like, she didn't really necessarily, like, need them to move to the next floor. And Mordecai was more than willing to sacrifice himself. He viewed as an honorable death in order to make sure the rest of his team move forward, his brother included. And we also know that Odette put her friend Armida, like, so I should back up. Odette was trying to bribe, I believe it was one of the sponsor gods, to kind of help them out to ensure they would make it down to a lower floor. And Armida was kind of negotiating this bribe. And Odette essentially somehow, so I think, oh my gosh, I'm sure I did not put this in my notes, so forgive me, I'm trying to recall this, but I believe she didn't want to pay the amount that the god or the sponsor wanted in order to help them out. And so she didn't agree, and it kind of put her friend Armida in a really difficult spot. And even though Odette's servitude was ending, Armida's was not, and she did not care about, kind of, for lack of better words, just like screwing her friend over to help Mordecai. And also to ensure financially she would be better off. So I think we're seeing like two main motivations for Odette. One is obviously there's a financial piece, but two, you're just seeing that like one of the main things she cares about is Mordecai and the fact that he's alive. And I'm starting to realize, I feel like Odette was put in a very difficult position, and the dungeon is so adept at doing this, just putting us in these terrible positions where we have to make these impossible choices. But I think Odette knew sacrificing Uzi was just a consequence of ensuring that he was going to be alive. And she knew that she would rather live with his ire than not have him around at all. And gosh, first of all, I understand Mordecai's pain and his anger with Odette, but at the same time, you just wonder, I just feel like there's just a few pieces that we're not quite getting. And Odette has truly always been an enigma to me. I didn't quite understand her motivation. And I'm starting to realize, like, perhaps there's definitely, I mean, money wise, like, yes, that's a motivation. But I just feel like there's also a piece with Mordecai. I don't necessarily understand why he's so important to her. I want to know a little bit more about that. Before we actually dive into this floor, floor 8, the Ghost of the Earth, I just want to take a second to appreciate just how goofy it all feels. And my goodness, this is by far the most lighthearted start, I feel like, to a book. Like, don't get me wrong, the prologue was very heavy, but the vibes of the overall floor just feels, I don't know if it's because we're in Havana, but it feels bright and vibrant and sunny. But as with most things in this series, that's very fleeting because there's this very like empty, eerie feeling as well. But the creatures we're coming across are truly like some of my favorites so far, namely the monk seal, who I will talk about a little bit later. But I just think I'm just enjoying it. And I feel like I needed this like little bit of levity and gosh, it's just a breath of fresh air after the last book, because the last book was emotionally very, very heavy for me. This is going to like pain me to admit a little bit, but I'm struggling a little bit with the mechanics of like the deck/squad situation. And mind you, I'm only like 22% of the way into this book. And so I do know that, like with most things with the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, as the series moves forward and I see how they kind of implement different things, like I know it will become more clear. But for right now, I'm just conceptualizing the whole thing as like a Pokemon. So every time I hear like or read the phrase Tiki cards, I'm like, cool, Pokemon, gotta catch them all. Okay, moving on. And I do know though that Carl does get to keep one of these cards after this floor, and I will share what I'm hoping he keeps or what I'm hoping he gets with one of like these flags. I do feel like sometimes, and I will talk about this more later too, like Matt has this like tendency to like information dump on us, but I feel like it's intentional. I don't feel like it's just to like overload us with information. I think there's a reason for it, and I will also unpack that in a bit too. But moving forward a little bit, I feel like everything will start to click, I'm hoping, as the story progresses and moves forward. I am really liking the card system, though. I think it's a really unique way to kind of integrate these characters, and it just feels really fun. And I said this early on in my coverage of these books, but I feel like a lot of what Matt does is like nods to millennials and kind of referencing like different like card games, especially like Pokemon or I mean, remember, do you guys remember Magic cards? Did you guys ever do? Okay, well, I'm going to move on. All this to say, I just feel like it all kind of clicks for me eventually as I see them integrate it into the actual floor, as I see them kind of using it in their gameplay. So as much as this pains me to admit this a little bit, I am just passenger princessing my way through these early chapters until I just have a better grasp on things. I don't feel like I can speak eloquently on them, on the card system yet, because I really truly just like don't fully comprehend what's happening. And this is a total sidebar, but it kind of feels like when your friends introducing you to like their favorite game and they're just throwing all the rules at you and you're like, and you want to know and you want to be good at the game, but you also know like I'm gonna have to fumble my way through this quite a bit until I fully understand what's going on. And it's the exact same vibe for me right now. One thing I do really like though in these chapters is the concept of the essence bar and having to kill creatures and fill it and constantly monitor it, but then using it for some powered attacks and honestly not letting it stay full too, because that could have some consequences. I think it's going to add a unique dynamic to these chapters specifically. Something that I think is very important to note is that they make a near facsimile of Cuba, and Donut also says, like, makes note of this as well. But it's very clear that they're just kind of making a complete like mockery and distortion of like their mythology. And sorry, it's kind of sad, but the more I like thought about this and unpacked it, I realized rather how intentional this is by the people running the dungeon, by Borant or I mean, maybe even the AI, but like Carl mentions at one point that Tiki cards were actually from a religion from one of the cookbook authors. And we know that they're kind of being used in like this, I don't know if campy is the right word, but the dungeon's using them as a way to kind of make the game fun and interesting. And it's like distorting like this previous race's religion just for entertainment purposes. And then Carl like also has this moment where he like walks out onto the streets of Havana and he's looking at everything and it feels almost real, aside from like the cars like offering much more damage than they should, mind you, or the people when you pass through them, their clothes fall off and they're just like this weird hologram. And then it's just like this weird feeling that I think he gets and that I kind of had too while reading this, where you realize, yes, it is real to a point. It feels real, but it's not. And it's just like almost a reminder of how much is gone, has been eliminated, has been taken away from them, and that they're never going to get it back. And I think it's intentional. They set up this level to intentionally remind them of how much they've lost, of how much of their world is just gone. And the fact that they could kind of pick anywhere to go on the globe. It's almost like they wanted people to choose somewhere that they were either familiar with or that would be kind of hard to revisit, but that they would naturally be gravitated towards. And it's just heartbreaking. And then we know that like phase 1 of the assault, where they're kind of gathering all like these Tiki cards and like filling their squad. At least I think that's the terminology they use. But we know that the second phase, I believe it begins on December 24th, which we know is Christmas Eve. And you also cannot convince me that the timing of this is not 100% intentional. And while I do know that they broke the other floor early and it could have just sped up the timing on this, the fact that they're choosing a Christian holiday to have this happen on, it feels like it all feels a little too intentional, I guess. I mentioned earlier that I felt like there was a point in the beginning of these chapters where we were just getting thrown a ton of information, particularly when Donut and Carl were getting a ton of loot. And, you know, I think it was Mordecai who theorized that like the AI was just trying to compensate probably for collapsing the other floor early. I think the AI was possibly just happy that the other floor didn't really come to be. I think the AI is particularly just done with the Boring Corporation and getting sued. But I'll be the first to admit, like, it was a lot. It was a lot to take in. And like I said, I'm kind of just, I don't even know how to say this. I think we're supposed to feel this way. It's supposed to feel overwhelming. I mean, when you're actually playing a video game and you're getting like, you know, you open up loot and you have to read the descriptions and then like, you don't really fully understand though, like how this item necessarily will function in the game till you get to start using it. And I think like that's kind of the approach I've taken when we get like these moments where we're opening up a ton of loot. I think I've just kind of accepted that like I will read through it. I'm not pressuring myself to grasp every little piece of it though, because I think where I really come to like engage with the loot and like understand it, it's when it's actually integrated into the actual gameplay. I think that overwhelming bit, like the part where you feel like you're taking in a lot of information, is intentional. I think Matt does a really good job of immersing you in the dungeon and kind of making you feel like a crawler. And when you're getting exposed to all of this loot and you're kind of put in a Carl's like shoes, so to speak. And you have to like take all this information and figure out how it's going to be used for gameplay. And it feels overwhelming. And in my case, I shut down a little bit and I'm like, okay, we'll figure it out later. And I think that's the whole point. It's not just to pack as much information in as possible. It's to overwhelm you a little bit. I think it's supposed to feel that way. And then also add in the small bit that they literally are always fighting for their life and they're always trying to survive. And then also something else I thought about is every time they're in the safe room, like their actions still need to feel intentional. Like I don't feel like they truly ever get to like rest unless it's like specifically like carved out and like planned, but they're always trying to like level up a skill, plot. I mean, Carl is just continually trying to plan something. And it's like, I think these moments where like, especially when like I had this feeling when they're opening the loot, it just kind of hit me that like, gosh, it's just never ending. Even when you're like in your safe room and you're safe, you're still just like constantly being inundated with various things. And it's a lot. It's a lot at times. There were 2 items though that I was particularly excited for. And one was for Carl, one was for Donut. Donut got the Bard's Golden Throat, which is the enchanted headset microphone. And I've said this before, and I think I'll say it again, but I love the nods to like 90s, early 2000s culture with like the whole headset with the microphone, because like I don't think anyone really uses those anymore. And so I think it's just a really cool nod to like, like the Britney Spears and Sync Backstreet Boys era. And I also love that it will help her with her bard capabilities, because I don't know if this is everyone, but I love a singing donut. I just think it's awesome. And I cannot wait to listen to all of those scenes on audio. I haven't done it yet. Please don't judge me. And for Carl, he got the enchanted nipple ring of the Defiler. And this was, oh gosh, it just kind of gave me a breath of relief, because it was kind of stressful on the last floor when he had to rely on other crawlers to let him know which mobs or crawlers or hunters like worshipped which gods. And I just wanted him to have the ability to do that independently and not have to rely on other people to identify who was safe for him to attack. And so this was like, it was just honestly very much needed. And I think this is also really helpful when they ran into Paz, Anton, and Sister Inez. He was really quickly to see that Paz and Anton both worship, I believe it was Ogun, and Sister Inez did not worship anybody, which, I don't know, Sister Inez, she's an interesting character to me. She, at one point, I believe Carl compared her to Miriam, but I don't know why I feel this way. In some ways, I felt like that offended me a little bit, because I really liked Miriam and I cried when she died. I did. And I don't know if Sister Inez like deserves that comparison. So far, she's given us no reason to feel that way. And I don't know if I'm just, I don't know why I have this weird feeling. I feel like it was weird. There was this moment where, like, I can't remember if it was Paz or Anton. They wanted to tag Asahano, and they wanted to use them for their squad and put them in their deck. And she was adamant, like, she would not do this. And to be fair, she could just be very pious and devout in her beliefs, which is honestly fair. But something that like didn't sit right with me. And how do I say this? I feel like I understand her plight to navigate her beliefs within the context of the dungeon, but I think it's very obvious that these are all made of gods within the context of the dungeon, and that even with her beliefs, like, she's just trying to survive, and to do that, you have to do it. And I don't know, it's just, I understand where she's at, but I feel like, how does she make it this far and still like retain these beliefs and still kind of be able to move forward? I feel like the people that have made it this far are very scrappy and kind of have to make these really tough choices. And so that's just where I feel like, how do I say this? Do I feel like she's being performative? Do I feel like maybe she's a touch unhinged? I think that's what it is. I think Miriam just was so steadfast in her beliefs, and she always, like, you just kind of got the sense, and especially in like her final moments, where she was always going to put the good of the many over just herself, always. And she kind of embodied what it was to be selfless and to really like practice what you preach. We also know that we really haven't seen them much in the dungeon, and to me, that's a little bit curious. And at one point, Carl did envy that fact, that like their anonymity, but I get the sense that she's not as good as she seems. And I don't know, it's just, I feel like my hackles are rose. I feel like you know what, I'm going to be making something out of nothing here. They're probably going to end up in their party. I don't know. But I just feel like whenever he meets a woman that has like this really kind maternal quality, I feel like I don't know if it opens up a wound within him. I do believe he has like this strong abandonment wound from his mother. And actually, we're going to leave Sister Inez over there in the corner, because I don't really know what to do with her. I don't really understand how I feel about her. Well, I'll let you know next week what I actually think about her. But in these chapters in particular, we get so much insight into Carl's story. When Carl goes on Shadowboxer with the former cookbook author, Rosetta, who has now decided to become like I think they did they call her like a fake Odette or something? But well, anyway, you get the vibe. She begins asking very pointed questions and making very pointed statements about his past. And actually, I'll just read directly what she says. Actually, before I read what she says, I just want to first give you the warning that, like, if you have little ears around, I'd probably skip ahead a little bit. But also, she talks about some very dark things from Carl's past. And if you've read these chapters, then you know. But I think for context, it's really important that I share those things. So your 15th birthday, she says, your mother poisoned your father and left him for dead. And then she went into the basement of your home and hanged herself from the pipes. According to the incident report from the police, you were the one to discover her. Oh my God. I mean, that to me right there is like wild. Like, but she keeps going. She says, your father had only ingested a portion of the poison and was barely injured. Your mother had left a note, but the contents of which are a mystery. Apparently, it was a letter to you. Wow. And it doesn't even stop there. Like, that is like the most heart-wrenching part. So I think this scene was like really pivotal for me in a lot of ways. One, I feel bad for ever insinuating Carl has a savior complex. I mean, this scene is just heartbreaking. And it gives so much just background to who he is as a person and what he's had to endure to just even make it to this point. The circumstances for which he chose to become a Coast Guard because he had no other option. It was all that was like really there and available. I mean, the fact that after his father literally deserted him, he just kept going to school and tried to survive and didn't really bother anybody. How horrific. Oh, and then there was a scene where the police brought him in for questioning, assuming that he did kill his father. And they were so kind to him. And he knew he was innocent, obviously. But he just entertained it because it felt nice to have that attention from an adult. And how heartbreaking. And then when they realized that he didn't kill his dad and that he was just a lonely, abandoned boy, they stopped caring about him. It stopped being there for him and didn't treat him as kindly. And the amount of things that he's had to endure and had to go through and like the loneliness he feels, like his character just makes so much more sense now. And so I do carry so much guilt for ever asserting that he has a savior complex, because truthfully, I wonder how this man is still standing. Despite everything, how does he continue just to have like a good soul and a moral compass despite everything? And he's just trying to do what he can with an impossible situation. And you have to wonder, like, obviously, like, our past shapes us. It does. But I do feel like, and I've mentioned this before, but the dungeon is not the time to unpack trauma. And I feel like it feels deeply unfair that he's put in these positions where people, especially like on this show, and I feel like Rosetta had other motives outside of this. Like, she just needed a reason to get him on the show. But to put him in this position where he has to like relive or talk about some of the most traumatic moments in his life, like, don't you think he's going through enough right now? Like, is this really the time to be discussing things that have happened to him? I just, sometimes things can feel relentless in this dungeon. I did mention, though, that Rosetta has some other information she was trying to get to Carl. Something about milk and potato stew. I didn't really pick up what she was putting down. I'll be really transparent with you. I'm hoping Carl did. I mean, was she just trying to assert that she was like a fellow crawler, a fellow author of the cookbook? I mean, maybe. Like, was she just trying to like nod and be like, hey, I'm here to help you. I know what you have in your inventory. I mean, I don't know. But shortly before we actually went on her show, we were given a quest. And it was called Pueblo de los Olvidados, and an Orisha is the source of the Gomid infection. And he used the last remaining power of his shrine to enter the town, and he's unable to leave. And the vile power of his presence has altered the minds of the town's residents, turning them mad. Remove him to free the town. Ugh, I'm so sick of these shrines. I mean, with the last book, with him desecrating Dawada's shrine, it's just like, I just feel like whenever there's a shrine involved, this is not going to end well. And so they were given this quest right before they were sent to like Rosetta Stone. And so I just know, like, how nothing good's gonna come from this. And switching gears a little bit again, I just think Samantha is obviously becoming so much stronger, but she did kind of give us a helpful clue that helps us understand like how her power functions within the dungeon. And she said, it takes a long time for my magic to build up. I had a lot of magic when we were fighting on that last floor, but I don't have much now. And so that made me question a few things. So does like her magic reset like with each floor? Does she have some sort of like magic bar that like increases as they kill more bosses, more creatures within the floor? Or is there something special about like floor 6 and potentially floor 9 that allows her to be more powerful? Because like we know like those floors have a special link, 3, 6, and 9. And if so, is that going to make her powerful on floor 9, which is also the faction wars? And will she stay with them then? And will she get a body? Like we know that she found the Bedlam Bride and she is convinced that this can function as a pulpmancer and give her her body that Signet left for her. I'm not convinced that that's going to happen. I do have a question though about the Bedlam Bride. Is Carl going to tag her? Is he going to make her part of their deck? And then will that be the card that he takes with him down to a lower floor? Which could prove to be pretty powerful in faction wars. Now, like, mind you, I have not engaged with the Bedlam Bride yet. I don't know anything about her. I'm just assuming she's pretty darn powerful just based on Samantha's description. So I feel like I just need to put my theory out there because sometimes I'm right or a little bit right or not completely off base. And it's fun to look back and be like, yeah, no. Or yeah, you did great. Each week I pick a favorite character from the set of chapters that I read. And this week it was really just no contest. My favorite character was Geraldo, the monk seal. Honestly, I just think the monk seals in general are really funny. I really enjoyed just the karate kung fu sounds that they make when they fight. I enjoy thinking of like a limber giant seal just moving through the air and doing all of these like karate kung fu type maneuvers. And it truly, like the creatures, like the level, even though it has like its really dark moments and heavy pieces, it has like a really good amount of levity and silliness that really is just exactly what I needed after reading book 5, truthfully. Moving forward, I want to also share my favorite donut quote from these chapters, and it was shortly after Carl was examining his tattoo kit, and Donut was kind of peeved that the dungeon stole her joke, so to speak. And Carl says, they say the sincerest form of flattery is when someone copies you. And the donut quote that I just thought was so funny and so pointed, mind you, was when she scoffed and said, no, Carl, that's just something thieves say to make themselves feel better about stealing other people's stuff. The sincerest form of flattery is when people cry when they meet you. And there's like these little moments where Matt just drops something like this that seems kind of innocuous, but I think as an artist or an author, like intellectual copyright is something that's very important. And sometimes I have to wonder when Matt throws these little like tidbits in, if he's trying to not so subtly tell us like, hey, I hate when people copy other things. And is he speaking through Donut? Am I reading too much into this? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments. And lastly is my favorite segment, which is the honorable mentions, where I just kind of dump everything that I thought was worth mentioning, but I couldn't quite fit neatly into this episode. And to start it off, why doesn't Prepotente ever respond to Carl in the chat? And you know what? I feel like I'm just going to keep rolling with your guys' comments because you keep saying things that I feel like just fit so perfectly into this episode. But someone commented on last week's video that Prepotente is reflective of the AI. And of course, to that, I responded like, interesting. Tell me more. Like, what does that mean? And so they gave me a couple like examples in the comments. They said, one, Pony is a petulant child, as is the AI. Pony was once one thing, like unaware, a goat. It was transformed into another thing, like a sentient being, just like the AI. Pony never talks with other crawlers. He only talks to them or at them, like the AI. Pony on occasion uses Carl for emotional release, like the AI. And Pony is the one who destroyed the new level, which the AI hated. And I'm like, that's a really interesting theory. I didn't quite think of it like that. But one thing to kind of make note of in relationships. It's important that there is some sort of reciprocity. And I do think Prepotente, if he wants to have healthy, functioning relationships, he needs to respond to people. That is one thing I'm really interested to see develop moving forward, is how Carl and Prepotente's relationship evolves as these books progress. I don't know how to neatly say this, but Mordecai is a Cyclops, and I feel like every time he gets a new form, I have to drop it in the honorable mentions. Admittedly, I kind of miss his cuddly bear form. I wish we would have gotten some time with him in his slime form that he briefly had on the last floor that we spent all of 5 minutes in. But nonetheless, he is now a one-eyed Cyclops. I feel like that's a redundant thing to say. Cyclops inherently only have one eye. The next honorable mention is that I'm very concerned about Brittany. Donut at one point made a comment about a villain arc, and to be fair, I was thinking about that even before she said it. Like, Louis seems to be like okay, like sad, maybe hardened, but okay. I mean, we know Cyrus was his absolute best friend, but Brittany seems very much not okay. And I'm also kind of worried this is like a Two-Face kind of situation. I just think this is going to end up not so good for Carl and possibly also Donut. I do think that Carl and Donut's team's flag being like a pair of like heart-shaped boxers like attached to this stake pole thing. I don't know. Does anybody else want one of these? Like, if this was a merch item, I would 100% buy it. I would love that on my bookshelf. Next up is the river is indeed still roaring in Carl's mind. And someone mentioned something about how like the river kind of coincided when Carl started using the Ring of Divine Suffering. And initially I kind of guessed that the river was kind of indicative of like his primal race shifting something inside of him, maybe his trauma. And I'm starting to think that the river within Carl is not just the culmination of one thing, but rather like the perfect storm of everything. I think it's reflective of his trauma, something that we've gotten a very deep insight into, especially in these chapters. The Ring of Divine Suffering, I think, is 100% having an impact on him, and indeed making that river seem so much louder in his mind. But I also think his primal race is impacting him internally. I mean, we hear about the AIs going primal time and time again. We know that Mordecai doesn't quite understand like what's going to change internally with him by choosing a primal race. So I don't know. We'll see. But like I said, I do think that the river, even though it's like we see it kind of like really starting to pick up its speed, I do think that it's not just the result of one thing, but the result of at least a few. One thing I think I should have talked about when I talked about Sister Inez was how Donut immediately didn't trust her. And I think I've learned to trust Donut's insight and Donut's kind of gut reaction. I don't know if that's the right word or right phrase, but yes, I think it is. I mean, obviously, I feel like sometimes she like uses like a superficial reason. Like in this case, she said that Inez was like a Havana Brown or something like that. And, she didn't trust that type of cat. But I think truly like Donut kind of has this like internal radar. And we see this with like certain NPCs or other crawlers where some she like instantly just accepts them and knows that they're good. I mean, we see this with even other mobs. Like, remember way back in book 1 with the goblins, like she was able to just like Lorelai and it was Lorelai and Rory, yes. Like she instantly charmed them and like kind of liked them. Where there's like certain people, crawlers, whatever, that she meets and she instantly dislikes them. And I think it's for a reason. And I've learned to trust Donut. And so I think that's maybe where like my hackles are raising with Sister Inez, truthfully. At one point, someone in the story made mention, I can't remember if it was Cascadia or someone else talking about like phase 2, like that there will be intelligent mobs carrying decks. But did anyone else kind of think of like Team Rocket at this point? I am fully riding with this Pokemon theme. I apologize if it really doesn't relate, but this is how my brain's conceptualizing it. One thing that I thought was nice, but could potentially be quite sad, was Katya at one point like mentioned to Carl that they try to make it a point to get together every day and eat together. And Carl's like, yeah, that sounds nice. Like I can meet you for dinner. And like this concept or idea of family dinner, it sounds all nice. Okay, this is maybe not the right way to view this, but part of me worries that like the more Carl kind of bonds with these other members in his guild and they start functioning even more like a party, it's just like more opportunity to get hurt and have people taken away. And I'm starting to realize like having people close to you in this dungeon is a liability. And I feel like the fact that this was mentioned is almost just like being dangled out there to be taken away. Like something, it's just like something else for Carl to lose. I don't want to think like that. But you know what? I feel like that's what I believe. Also, Louis being bothered by like Samantha's intention and like incessant chats is absolutely frying me. And then also like his like unwillingness to like actually do something about it and kind of like narking on her. Like, I just think it's funny. I think it's really funny. It's just like a little plot point out there that I just feel like, again, needs an honorable mention. I did not really do a good job of talking about him. So yeah, we're going to throw him in here. Harbinger, the syndicate liaison. We need to chat about him. Obviously, he was the one that put a stop to the Rosetta interview because he, rightfully so, was like, hey, Carl, you're getting insider intel. Like, you guys are communicating in code in some way. I can tell. And I don't fault him for that. But you just get the sense that he is not a good person or a good Cape Bread. He's not a person. But, okay, Oren, I feel like had a code and he was authentic and he really took his job seriously, where you feel like Harbinger is bought and paid for. He is not someone that is going to remain impartial and follow the rules. I think it was already alluded to that he was working with the Skull Empire. And I don't, okay, this is where it gets a little fuzzy for me. Was he the Caprid that was like in Maggie's like head telling her what to do? Or was that a different Caprid from the Plenty? I don't know. Let me know. Correct me on that. I could easily research this, but okay, this is a sidebar. I have been really trying not to look things up, not because I'm like worried about spoilers necessarily, but I really want this series to feel like I'm authentically experiencing it for the first time. And I just like want to remember like what I remember based on my notes. And I try not to look things up because I don't want to, how do I say this? I just want to be careful that I'm not using other people's theories or predictions or even using things that I've seen to make those predictions. So if I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about sometimes, it's because I don't. And then the last honorable mention is shout out to like the training warehouse ring things to be able to kind of play with the Tagi cards. Like, honestly, those were some of the funniest moments in these chapters, like watching them quite comedically pick the easy mode and then the creatures that came out. Like, I was up at 2 a.m. reading these chapters and genuinely laughing out loud because I just thought it was so funny. I can't remember the name of the creature, but the one that just kind of, I can't even remember what it was called, but it was just so pitiful and it was just so funny. You know, like that saying, like you don't remember all the details, but you remember how someone made you feel. Like, I remember how those things made me feel, but I could not tell you what they were called or what they looked like. Some looming questions that I have moving forward. First and foremost, who is this random room attendant in Mordecai's room? I mean, at first I was like, is it Odette? But like, that is ridiculous. Like, he still like hates her. So no, but I do think, I wonder, is he going to pick someone that is kind of intertwined with his past with Odette that might either make her mad or jealous? Like, I don't think this is just like for funsies. I think this is going to cause a bit of complications for their party. And then my next question is, Katya actually going to tell Carl what she's been meaning to talk to him about? Quite frankly, I don't think there's ever a good moment to talk to somebody in the dungeon. And I'm hoping, I'm pretty sure it's just about like having the crown of the sepsis whore, but I'm wondering if there's something more that she needs to talk to him about. And what is that? Like, share with the class, please. My next question is, what in the world is Kiwi's baby going to come out as? I mean, I would love a baby Mongo. Honestly, wouldn't mind a little baby bear, but like a weird dinosaur bear hybrid thing kind of freaks me out a little bit. I don't know. We will see. And my last question is, how are we going to get out of this pickle with the Gommids? I have a feeling we will 100% find out in next week's episode as we continue our crawl through The Eye of the Bedlam Bride by Matt Dinniman. What did I miss this week that you want me to chat a little bit more about? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to get alerted when there's new episodes. Thank you so much for crawling with me today. Have a great week. Bye.